You're listening to the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.
So as we get towards the end of the second chapter of Taanit, we are gradually going to shift from days when we fast to people and days when we don't fast. So it's a very interesting turnabout. And again, that we're seeing the same association from Mishnah to Mishnah that we see in Tehillim. It's just with the end of one Mishnah linking to the beginning of the next Mishnah, just as Tehillim do. And you can have a look at Esa Enai, that's a great example. But in order to understand these days, we need to understand the divisions of the people of Israel. And I just wanted to begin, before jumping into the Mishnah, by just talking through a table which is on the source sheet in two languages, just to explain how the priests were organized. And there is something called a mishmar. A mishmar is a guard. And it represents, there were 24 mishmarot, so there are 24 guards, which represent 24 divisions of priests. And each one of these will be on duty in the temple 1 week at a time. So if you would be part of a mishmar, a part of a guard, if you were a Kohen, and then you go to Jerusalem for 1 week to carry out the temple service. Now, they didn't need everybody in the mishmar on every day of the week. So the mishmar itself, the guard, was split into 6, or some people would say 7 groups, each, and called Anshei Beit Av, a father's house. So these are family groups, but they can't have been exact families because somehow they managed to make it work out so that each mishmar, each guard, was split into exactly 6. So they exactly 6 family groups. And a family group would serve in the temple for 1 day. On Shabbat, everybody would serve. Or perhaps there were 7 Anshe, 7 fathers' house, 7 divisions of fathers' house. We're not, whether there were 6 or 7 groups, we're not quite sure. The sources give different opinions. But the point is that the Kohanim was split into 24 mishmarot, and then each mishmar was split into 6 or 7 family groups. And then in parallel with the mishmarot, with the 24 guards, were 24 ma'amads. Ma'amad means standing up. It refers to standing over the sacrifice. And the people of Israel participated in the sacrifice in some way. So 24 divisions of local people were attached to the 24 guards of priests. And so when the Kohanim went up to Jerusalem to serve, the Israelites who were attached to them would, we already learned in the Mishnah of Megillah that they, for example, would read from Sefer Bereshit on the 6 days. That they'd read the story of the 6 days of creation on the days that the 6 family groups served in the temple. So we got these 3 groups, and the Rambam tells us that they were lenient on them with regard to the fast. And these are the priests on duty in the temple because of the temple service, in order that their bodies shouldn't be weak, because they're running around lifting and carrying and pushing and shoving, and they're doing all the work of the temple. It's hard work. And because they're doing the work of the temple, they don't fast. Now, if that's understood, we can now understand the Mishnah. Let's jump in at the 6th Mishnah of the 2nd chapter. Shalosh Taaniyot harishonot anshei mishmar mitanim velo mashlimim, on the first 3 fasts. So these are the first 3 fasts after we get failure of rain. On the first 3 fasts, the men of the guard fast, Anshe Mishmar. So this is all 6 family groups. Anshe mishmar mitanim velo mashlimim. The men of the guard fast, but they don't complete their fast. Ve'anshe beit av lo hayu mitanim. And the men of the father's house, so these are the people on duty that day, they don't fast at all. Shalosh shniot. On the second group of three, anshe mishmar mitanim umashlimim ve'anshe beit av mitanim velo mashlimim. On the second of the three fasts, the men of the guard fast, and they finish the fast. And the men of the father's house fast, but they don't complete the fast. Sheva achronot, elu va'elu mitanim umashlimim divrei Rabbi Yoshua. On the last 7 fasts, they both have to fast, and they both complete their fasts. So that's the view of Rabbi Yoshua. And the halakha actually, the sages have a different view, and the halakha, according to the Rambam, goes according to the sages. B'chachamim omrim, shalosh taniyot harishonot elu ve'elu lo hayu mitanim. On the first 3 fasts, neither of these 2 groups. Shalosh shniyot anshe mishmar mitanim ve'lo mashlimim ve'anshe beitav lo hayu mitanim. On the second 3, the men of the guard fast, but don't complete their fast. They might, and the men of the father's house don't fast at all, because they're on duty. V'sheva achronot, anshe mishmar mitanim umashlimim, v'anshe beit av mitanim v'lo mashlimim. And on the last 7 fasts, the people of the guard fast and complete their fasts, but the men of the father's house, these are the people who are on duty, mitanim v'lo mashlimim. They start fasting, but they don't complete the fast. So we're a little bit, we are, in the words of the Rambam, we are lenient on the people who are serving the temple because of the work they need to do. And there are other differences between the men of the guard and the men of the father's house. Now we know that Kohanim are forbidden, it's forbidden to serve in the temple while drunk. It's a verse in Vayikra. And there is an idea, by the way, that this is one of the reasons why the 2 sons of Aaron were killed. Perhaps they drank something before offering their strange fire. We learn in the Mishnah, Anshe Mishmar Mutarin Lishot Yain Baleilot. The men of the guard, so this is the big group, were allowed to drink at night. But not during the day, because perhaps they might be called upon to help during the day, even if that wasn't their day on duty. But the men of the father's house may not, neither during the day, neither during the night. They stay away from alcohol during the 24 hours that they're on duty. It's a bit like driving. You don't drink and drive, you don't drink and serve in the temple. Anshe mishmar ve'anshe ma'amad asurin milispod u'milechabes. Both the men of the guard and the men of the ma'amad. So in other words, this is the 1 in 24 divisions, the Kohanim going up to Jerusalem, and the Anshe ma'amad, the people of Israel who are left behind in their local towns, but are kind of celebrating with them. They're reading Sefer Bereshit, they're saying Tehillim, and so on. Both of these groups of people may not cut their hair nor wash their clothes that whole week. And on Thursday, they're permitted in honor of Shabbat. And we learned this halacha when we were learning the Mishnah of Moed Katan. We learned that the sages want us to basically get ready before time. So the idea is that we should have our hair cut and our clothes washed before the festival comes in. We shouldn't put off this stuff and do it on the intermediate days. And they forbade this activity, except for people who really needed to do so, on Chol HaMoed. And similarly, they forbade it on the week of the Mishmar. If your Mishmar is on duty that week, you've got to get your hair cut and your clothes washed beforehand. And similarly, if you're one of the Ma'amad, if you're connected to the Mishmar, you've got to get your hair cut and your clothes washed the week before, except for the Thursday, because Shabbat, the kavod of Shabbat is an overriding principle, and even on Chol HaMoed, even on Chol HaMoed, even when you're one of the Ma'amad, we can still do these things on Thursday for the kavod of Shabbat. And we'll see in a minute that what we saw already, for example, that shops are open on Thursday for the kavod of Shabbat, even though generally they're shut on a Thursday that's a fast day. The Mishnah then goes on, and we're extending from people who don't fast now to days when we don't fast. And the Mishnah explains, Kol hakatuv b'Megillat Taanit dila l'mispad lefanav asur ul'acharav mutar. Every day about which is written one may not eulogize. In Megillat Taanit, on the preceding day it's prohibited, but on the following day it's permitted. Now, what is going on here? What is Megillat Taanit? Well, there's a remark in the Talmud in Shabbat. Tanu Rabbanan, our fathers taught, Mi katav Megillat Taanit amru Hananiah ben Chizkiyahu ve'siato. Hananiah ben Chizkiyahu and his helpers, or his help, or his gang, wrote Megillat Taanit, Shehayu Mechabavin et Atzarot, because they held dear the troubles. Now, I think this is probably a euphemism, because Megillat Taanit is not a register of troubles. It's a register of days on which Israel was delivered from trouble. It's a holiday list. But it's kind of euphemistically called in this Baraita a list of troubles. And it is the list of days when we're not allowed to fast. Now, most of these have actually dropped out of current usage. The only ones that really jump out are Hanukkah and Purim. We can't fast on Hanukkah and Purim. But Megillat Taanit has got a much, much longer list of ancient, it's like an ancient calendar list. There's more than one text available. The academic Vered Noam, distinguished professor of Talmud at the Tel Aviv University, has produced a fine edition, actually showing that there are two completely separate versions of Megillat Taanit, and she separates out the two versions. That's Megillat Taanit. And the Mishnah seems to know about Megillat, and this is fascinating. The Mishnah knows about Megillat Taanit because it says, Kol hakatuv Megillat Taanit. Everything, every day about which is written, you cannot eulogize in Megillat Taanit. If you can't eulogize on that day, meaning it's a holiday day, you can't eulogize before it either. But you could eulogize the day after. And Rabbi Yossi is going to disagree. Rabbi Yossi Omer lefanav ulacharav asur. Rabbi Yossi says it's forbidden both the day before and the following day. Now, let's get on to fasting. Dila lehit ananya. One may not fast. If Megillat Taanit says one may not fast, lefanav ulacharav mutar. If the Megillat Taanit says you can't fast, you can fast the day before and you can fast the day after. And Rabbi Yossi says, lefanav asur ulacharav mutar. Before is forbidden, but after is permitted. And I think we do run according to Rabbi Yossi now. I think we can fast, for example, no, I'm not sure, because we fast the day before Purim. We fast the day before Purim. We do not fast the day after Purim.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.